The sky had the unsettling habit of pretending everything was normal right up until it was. Aaron noticed it first when a cloud stopped moving, then politely reversed direction like it had forgotten something important. He stared at it for a long moment, squinting as if that might force reality to behave. "Nope," he muttered, grabbing his jacket. "I'm not qualified for this kind of weather." The street below was louder than usual, not in volume but in confusion. Car alarms went off in uneven rhythms, people argued with their phones, and a street vendor was aggressively handing out free sandwiches, as if bread might solve whatever was happening to the universe. Aaron stepped outside just as gravity seemed to hesitate. His foot hovered half a second too long before touching the ground again. "Great," he said under his breath. "Even walking has bugs now." A low hum spread through the air, not loud but constant, like the city itself had started thinking. Lights flickered in patterns that didn't feel random, and somewhere nearby, glass shattered in a neat, circular wave. Aaron should have turned back. He knew that. He was, by all accounts, very good at avoiding situations that involved mysterious humming and reality glitches. Then he heard it. A small, sharp cry, barely noticeable under the chaos, but persistent. It wasn't panic, it was confusion. That alone made him pause. Panic he understood. Confusion meant something else. He followed the sound down a narrow side street where the air felt thicker, almost layered. A vending machine was violently dispensing snacks without pause, cans hitting the pavement like metallic rain. "Well," Aaron said, stepping around a growing pile of soda, "at least someone's having a productive day." The cry came again, closer this time. He rounded a corner and froze. There, between a half-collapsed wall and the overly generous vending machine, a child floated just above the ground. Not high, just enough to be wrong. The child looked human at first glance, small, fragile, wide-eyed, but the long, delicate ears tilted slightly upward, twitching as if catching signals in the air. Their gaze locked onto Aaron, and for a moment, everything else seemed to quiet. "Oh," Aaron said softly, "you are definitely not part of the weather." He stepped closer, cautiously, hands slightly raised like he was approaching a nervous animal. "Hi," he tried, immediately regretting how insufficient that sounded. "I'm not helpful generally, but I can try." The child didn't move away. If anything, they drifted a little closer, as if curiosity outweighed fear. Aaron glanced around, half expecting someone else to take over, someone more qualified, an expert in floating children, perhaps. No one came. "Okay," he sighed, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a juice box he had no memory of buying. "This is my best offer. It's either this or awkward conversation." The child tilted their head, ears twitching again, then slowly reached out. The moment their fingers touched the juice box, the hum in the air shifted, softer now, like a machine adjusting its frequency. Aaron blinked. "Right, of course. Juice fixes reality. I should have led with that." A sudden ripple passed through the street behind him, the air bending like heat over asphalt, except sharper, more deliberate. Aaron didn't turn immediately. He was too focused on the child, who now clung lightly to his sleeve, their small hand surprisingly warm. "All right," he said, voice quieter now, more certain despite everything. "Step 1, we leave the glitchy alley. Step 2, we figure out what you are. Step 3, he hesitated, glancing at the shifting air behind him. We pretend I know what I'm doing." The child made a soft sound, almost like a laugh. "Good," Aaron nodded. "Confidence is key." As he lifted the child into his arms, the world seemed to pause, not freeze, but wait. The hum faded into something distant, watchful. Aaron felt it then, a strange certainty settling in his chest. This wasn't random. None of it was. "Yeah," he murmured, adjusting his grip as the child rested against him. "I have a feeling this is going to be a problem." The child's ears twitched once more, and far above them, the sky flickered again. Only this time, it didn't pretend to be normal. By the time Aaron reached his apartment, he had already accepted 3 important truths. The sky was broken, the child was not from anywhere on Earth, and he was now somehow responsible. He pushed the door open with his shoulder, nearly dropping his keys, while the child remained unnervingly calm, as if being carried by a stranger through a malfunctioning city was completely acceptable. "Welcome," Aaron said, slightly out of breath, "to the least prepared rescue location in human history." The child looked around, their long ears twitching slowly, as if scanning the room. Aaron placed them gently on the couch, which immediately made a suspicious creaking sound. "Don't worry," he added quickly. "It does that even when reality is stable." For a moment, nothing happened. The hum outside faded into a distant murmur, and the apartment settled into an almost normal silence. Aaron exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Okay," he said, pacing slightly. "New plan. We stay calm, we assess the situation, and we absolutely do not panic." The lights flickered. "I said we do not panic," he repeated, pointing at the ceiling like it was personally responsible. The child let out a soft, curious sound and slid off the couch. They moved slowly, deliberately, touching objects as they passed. A lamp, a chair, the wall. Each contact sent a faint ripple through the air, barely visible but impossible to ignore. Aaron watched, arms crossed, trying very hard to look like this was all part of a reasonable day. "You're redecorating?" he guessed. The child stopped in the middle of the room and looked up at him. Then, with surprising precision, they began moving things, not with their hands, at least not entirely. The table shifted slightly to the left. Books slid across the shelf. A chair rotated just enough to feel intentional. Aaron blinked several times. "No," he said slowly, "that's not how furniture works." Within minutes, his living room no longer resembled anything designed by humans. Objects formed strange alignments, intersecting angles that made his eyes hurt if he stared too long. It wasn't random. It was structured, complex, like a map drawn in a language that didn't use lines. The child stepped back, observing their work. Their ears lifted slightly, as if waiting. "For what?" Aaron asked, glancing around. "Applause, because I'm impressed, but also deeply concerned." The lights flickered again, stronger this time. The hum returned, but different now, focused, directional. Aaron felt it in his chest, like a vibration trying to sync with his heartbeat. "Okay," he muttered, grabbing the edge of the table for balance. "That's new, I don't like new." The child made another sound, softer this time, almost melodic. The hum responded. And then the Wi-Fi router exploded into life. Every device in the apartment lit up at once. Screens flickered, speakers crackled, and a low, rhythmic tone filled the room. It wasn't noise, it was communication. Patterns emerged, repeating, evolving. Aaron stared at his phone as it displayed symbols he had never seen before. "Right," he said, nodding slowly. "Of course, we're hijacking the internet now. That's efficient." The child turned toward him, eyes bright, as if expecting understanding. "I don't," Aaron admitted, holding up his hands. "I don't understand any of this. I can barely set up a password." The tone shifted again, deeper now. The air in the center of the room began to bend, not violently like before, but carefully, like something precise was being assembled. The strange arrangement of furniture seemed to guide it, each object aligning with the distortion. Aaron took a cautious step back. "Please tell me that's decorative." The child didn't respond. They simply watched, completely still. The distortion sharpened, forming a thin, vertical line in the air. It shimmered, pulsing with the same rhythm as the signals flooding the room. Aaron felt the weight of it, the certainty that this was not chaos anymore. This was intentional. "Okay," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "We have officially reached the part where I am out of my depth." The line widened slightly, light spilling through in colors that didn't belong to any spectrum he recognized. The hum settled into something steady, expectant. Aaron glanced at the child, who now stood quietly beside him, their small hand gripping his sleeve again. "Next time," he said softly, "we're just ignoring the weird sky." The child made a faint sound that almost resembled amusement. And then something moved within the light. The light did not burst or roar. It unfolded, patient and deliberate, like something that had done this many times before. Aaron stood very still, mostly because his body had decided that sudden movements were no longer a good life strategy. The child's grip on his sleeve tightened slightly, not in fear, but in recognition. A figure stepped through. She looked human enough that Aaron's brain tried to accept it, but the details refused to cooperate. Her long ears curved elegantly upward, catching the shifting light as if it belonged to them. Her eyes moved across the room with quiet precision, pausing briefly on the impossible arrangement of furniture before settling on the child. Relief crossed her face. Aaron cleared his throat. "Hi," he said, because apparently that was his signature move now. "Before anything else happens, I'd like to officially confirm that I did not break the universe. I just found it like this. The woman looked at him, and for a moment he felt as though every thought he had ever had was being politely reviewed. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled, small but real. You did not break it, she said, her voice calm, each word carefully shaped. You answered it. Aaron blinked. That feels like a very generous interpretation of events. The child stepped forward, releasing his sleeve and moving toward her. She knelt, meeting them halfway, placing a hand gently on their shoulder. The hum in the room softened, shifting into something almost warm. They were sent, she continued, glancing briefly at Aaron, to find a response. A response, Aaron repeated, like a survey, because I didn't see any instructions. The woman's smile deepened slightly. A question does not always need words. Aaron looked at the child, then back at her. And the question was, what exactly? Will a random human pick up a floating kid during a reality malfunction? Because that seems oddly specific. The child made a soft sound, almost like a giggle. The woman's expression softened further. Yes, she said simply, something like that. Aaron exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Great, so I accidentally passed an interstellar test. Do I get a certificate or? You get contact, she replied. The word settled heavily in the air, but it wasn't threatening. It felt inevitable. The disturbances, she continued, gesturing lightly around the room, were not errors. They were openings, controlled, observed. We have watched your world for a long time, waiting for a moment that reveals not your strength, but your instinct. Aaron shifted his weight. My instinct was mostly confusion, and juice boxes. That was enough. Silence followed, but it was no longer empty. It carried meaning, connection, something beginning rather than ending. The child returned to Aaron's side, gently taking his hand this time. He looked down, surprised, then back at the woman. So, what happens now? She stood, the light behind her stabilizing, no longer tearing at the edges of the room. Now we begin, she said. Not as strangers, not as observers, but as those who have already met. Aaron nodded slowly, absorbing it. The fear he expected wasn't there. In its place was something quieter, steadier. Okay, he said after a moment. I can work with that. I mean, I probably shouldn't, but I will. The woman stepped back toward the light, the child hesitating only briefly before letting go of his hand. Aaron felt the absence immediately, but it wasn't loss. It was completion. Wait, he called out. One question. She paused. Next time, he said, gesturing vaguely at the room, can we skip the part where my furniture becomes a cosmic puzzle? It's very hard to explain to guests. For a second, nothing happened. Then, unmistakably, she laughed. It was soft, brief, but real. We will consider it, she said. The light folded inward, the distortion smoothing out until the room was just a room again. The hum faded completely. Aaron stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty space where history had quietly changed. Then he looked around at his apartment, at the slightly crooked table, the faint marks left behind by something far beyond him. Right, he muttered, grabbing a chair and dragging it back into place. First contact, no pressure. He paused, then smiled faintly. Next time, he added, I'm stocking better snacks. The world did not end, which Aaron found mildly disappointing given how much it had prepared for dramatic collapse. Instead, it continued, quietly, stubbornly normal on the surface, while something vast and unseen shifted just beneath it. 3 days passed. On the first day, every news channel tried to explain the sky incident using words like atmospheric anomaly and temporary disruption, which Aaron translated as, we have absolutely no idea. He sat on his couch, eating cereal straight from the box, nodding along like a professional expert in not understanding things. Temporary, he repeated, watching a panel of very serious people argue about cloud behavior. Yes, clouds are famous for opening doors. On the second day, his apartment Wi-Fi began behaving suspiciously well. Not fast, perfect. Every device connected instantly, signals never dropped, and once, briefly, his screen displayed a sequence of symbols that felt familiar. Not readable, but recognizable, like a memory he hadn't lived. Aaron leaned back in his chair. Okay, he said slowly, I'm being monitored by polite aliens with excellent tech support. I can accept that. On the third day, the signal came again. Not through a screen, not through a device, but through the air itself. A faint ripple, barely visible, forming in the center of his living room. Aaron didn't panic this time. He didn't grab anything or step back. He just sighed and stood up. All right, he said, walking toward it. Let's see what I accidentally agreed to this time. The ripple expanded into a soft distortion, not sharp like before, but stable. Familiar. Aaron stopped a few steps away, hands in his pockets, as if he were meeting a neighbor rather than something that could bend space. You know, he added, most people get emails. I get reality glitches. The distortion shifted, and within it, a shape formed, not fully visible but enough. The same presence, the same calm. You adapted, the woman's voice came, clear despite the lack of a body. Aaron shrugged. I complain less now. That counts as growth, right? It does. He nodded once, accepting that more easily than he would have before. So, this is the beginning part you mentioned. Yes. He glanced around his apartment, at the now ordinary furniture, the quiet walls. Feels small for something that important. It is not small, she replied. It is precise. Aaron considered that. Then he smiled slightly. You know, a week ago I would have run away from this, or pretended it wasn't happening, or blamed the vending machine. And now, he thought for a moment, now I make sure I have snacks ready. There was a pause and he could almost feel her amusement again. Your world will change, she said. Slowly, carefully. We will not arrive all at once. We will be known piece by piece. Aaron nodded. Good, because we're not great with sudden changes. We still argue about phone updates. The distortion pulsed softly, like agreement. And me, he asked. What's my role in all this? Please say, guy who stays home and occasionally waves. I'm very qualified for that. You are a point of contact, she said. Not because you are special, because you chose. Aaron let out a quiet breath. That landed differently now. Right, he said, choice. He looked at the space where the child had stood days ago, remembering the small hand gripping his sleeve. The quiet trust in something completely unknown. Then I'll keep choosing, he added. Seems to be working so far. The distortion began to fade slowly, without urgency. We will return, she said. I figured, Aaron replied. Try knocking next time. Or, you know, whatever the interdimensional version of knocking is. A faint, almost imperceptible laugh echoed through the air. Then it was gone. The room settled into silence again, but it wasn't empty. It felt connected, like a thread stretched beyond what he could see. Aaron stood there for a while, then turned and walked to the window. The sky looked normal perfectly, suspiciously normal. He folded his arms, watching it carefully. All right, he said quietly. I'm ready. A pause, then he added with a small grin, mostly. And for once, the sky didn't argue.